This is Ian from Easy Genie. Today I'm going to be talking about 23andMe ethnicity estimates and what they mean, and maybe some pitfalls that you should be aware of when you're looking at your ethnicity estimates on 23andMe. So let's get started. This is a ethnicity map of a relative, and did the test, got the results back, and I helped to interpret the results. And you can see that over here it says European 99.9%, Northwestern European 99.9%, British and Irish 99.9%. And then it starts getting into the different regions where our ancestors supposedly came from. And this is really interesting information. For one, it kind of corresponds to what the paper trail says. As far as we know, most of our ancestors did come from Britain and Ireland and Scotland. And then also, kind of number two, it helps us concentrate where our research should be. So we know that most of our research before our ancestors immigrated to the United States should be concentrated in this part of the world. So you may be wondering, well, how do they come up with these numbers? How do they know that? How do they know that my ancestors are, or the ancestors of this particular person are 99.9% from Britain and Ireland, and may even come from these places: County Cork, Greater London, etc. And the way that they do this is 23andMe, as well as the other genetic genealogy services. They have a sample of thousands of people who they know come from certain parts of the world. They compare the DNA that you submit with their other people that they've already sampled, reference populations. They say there's 14,000 people with known ancestry. That means these people, they came from a certain part of the world, and it's these 14,000 people, they're mapped to those specific locations. So they take the DNA that we supply, kind of compare it to those known areas, the people from those known areas, and then they come up with these populations. And if you go to the 23andMe blog, they'll explain more details about how they get to that estimate. And also, they, to their credit, they also acknowledge some of the problems with this particular technique. And let's talk a little bit about the problems, because this affects a lot of people. I want to show you something in this current estimate for this relative. It says that Greater London is the number 2 spot that they identified our ancestors coming from. The paper trail does not reflect any of our ancestors coming from Greater London. In fact, everybody came from Ireland and northeastern Scotland, to the best of our knowledge. The reason why Greater London is showing up here is because so many people ended up migrating to that area, and it's conceivable that, for instance, some of our ancestors, especially after the famine, we know that some of them went to the United States because we have records of that, but also some of them ended up migrating to England to either look for work or to avoid starvation, and they ended up in the big cities of northern England, as well as some is in London, and some of their descendants still live there now. And I think that's why this particular estimate's showing up, Greater London. But as far as we know, none of our ancestors came from Greater London, at least not in not in the past 200 or 300 years, or even longer than that. So this data is a little bit misleading. The other thing I want to show you is actually the same person's 23andMe ethnicity estimate from 2017, and it was showing that we had ancestry in Southern Europe. And this completely blew our minds, because this was outside of what we understood about our ancestors, who, as I said before, as far as we know, mostly came from Ireland and northern Scotland and northern England. So this older 23andMe estimate, it said Iberia, which is basically Spain and Portugal. It even gave a timeline and said, oh, your Iberian ancestor is from this particular period in the 1700s. So this sent us down this rabbit hole of trying to turn up research or the connection for Spain or Portugal, and we couldn't do it. And guess what? When 23andMe, they update their reference population every few years. In 2022 or 2023, the Iberian connection completely disappeared. So we learned a hard lesson there. And the lesson is, while these are very good for rough estimates of where people may come from, the particular details, like when they highlight something like you have ancestors from Greater London, or 1% come from some area of the world that you weren't expecting, be very careful of that, because some of these ethnicity estimates are either based on weird sampling issues, or the reference population isn't that big to begin with, and they just don't have enough people to make an accurate estimate. And this is particularly true for people from certain parts of the world, including some of my own relatives who come from areas where there is not a lot of sampling of the reference population, so you cannot get an accurate estimate of what your ethnicity is. And I can guarantee that the 23andme as well as the Ancestry.com estimates for ethnicity will be shifting, every few years as they update their reference models. And these small, tiny populations will get washed out or maybe replaced by somebody else. And you just have to be aware that these estimates are just that. They're estimates. It's not set in stone. And, a lot more research is really needed to determine where specific ancestors came from, and also to verify information like this where, you have people who come from Greater London, and that may not be the case, but more research is needed to determine that. If this video helped you out, please take a moment to like it and follow me. And if you go to easygenie.org, click on blog, we have lots more tips and information about getting started with genealogy. Thanks so much for watching.